If you had looked at my life 6 months ago, you would have hated me. I would have hated me, too, knowing what I know now. I was 32 years old, a senior marketing director for a tech firm, and married to Mark, the kind of man who brings you coffee in bed on Tuesdays just because. We were the couple everyone invited to dinner parties because we were safe. We were stable. We were the goal. We were in the middle of closing on our dream home. It was a sprawling Victorian restoration project 3 streets over from my childhood home. It was the kind of house that required a jumbo loan and perfect credit, both of which we had. Or rather, both of which I thought we had. Mark was an architect. It made sense that he handled the renovation plans, but somewhere along the line, he had convinced me that he should handle the finances, too. "You work too hard, Elle," he would say, massaging my shoulders after I clocked out of a 12-hour day. "Let me worry about the boring stuff. You just worry about picking out the tile for the master bath." I was so grateful for his help that I didn't notice he was building a cage around me, one bank statement at a time. The first crack in the porcelain appeared on a rainy Thursday in November. I was leaving the office early to meet our mortgage broker for the final signing. I remember feeling lighter than air. I had the champagne chilling in the fridge at home. I arrived at the broker's office 10 minutes early. Mark was running late, which was unlike him. When he finally burst through the door, he looked pale, sweaty. He kept checking his phone. "Sorry," he breathless, kissing my cheek. His lips felt cold. Traffic was a nightmare. We sat down. The broker, a nice man named David who had been jovial throughout the whole process, wouldn't meet my eyes. He was shuffling papers, clearing his throat repeatedly. "Is something wrong, David?" I asked, reaching for Mark's hand. Mark's hand was clammy. He squeezed my fingers so hard it hurt. "There's a problem with the credit pull," David said softly. "The final check we do before closing." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, did we forget a Netflix bill? I'm sure it's a glitch. My score is over 800. David slid a piece of paper across the mahogany desk. "Elena, your score has dropped nearly 200 points in the last 90 days. Your debt-to-income ratio is through the roof. The bank has pulled the financing." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall and the blood rushing in my ears. "That's impossible," I said, my voice trembling. "I have zero debt besides my car lease." "Elena," David said, his voice gentle but firm, "the report shows 5 new credit accounts opened in your name in the last 4 months. The total utilization is at 95%. The total outstanding balance is $62,000. I felt the world tilt on its axis. $62,000. I turned to Mark. I expected him to be outraged. I expected him to be screaming about fraud, about hackers, about fixing this immediately. Instead, Mark was staring at the carpet. He wasn't surprised. He was resigned. "Mark," I whispered. He didn't look at me. He couldn't look at me. And in that silence, the man I loved died, and a stranger took his place. The drive home was silent. Mark tried to speak once, mumbling something about explaining, but I put my hand up. I couldn't breathe, let alone listen to a spin job. When we got inside our current apartment, I didn't scream. I went straight to his home office. I demanded his laptop password. "Oh, please, let's just talk," he begged, standing in the doorway. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. "Password," I said. My voice was ice. "Now, or I call the police right this second and report the fraud." He gave it to me. I logged into our shared banking portal. Then I went to the credit monitoring sites he had always told me were a waste of money and that he checked them for us. I reset the passwords, and there they were. 5 cards, all open in my name, all maxed out. Amex Platinum, Chase Sapphire, a Discover card, 2 Visas. It was a kaleidoscope of plastic that had ruined my life. I started opening the statements. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely click the mouse. I wanted to see where the money went. Maybe he had a gambling problem. Maybe he was in trouble with loan sharks. I was prepared to be a martyr. I was prepared to help him fix his sickness. But the statements didn't show casinos. They didn't show cash advances to shady entities. They showed a life. A luxury life. Just not with me. August 4th, $300 at a steakhouse in the city. I was in Chicago for a conference that weekend. August 5th, $400 at a boutique florist. I hate flowers. I'm allergic. September 2nd, $2,000. The Ritz-Carlton. A weekend stay. He told me he was on a boys' camping trip. Then came the jewelry stores. Tiffany's. Cartier. A bracelet for $3,000. Earrings for $1,500. I looked down at my own wrist. I was wearing a Fitbit. I scrolled further. Flights. 2 tickets to Miami. 2 tickets to Napa Valley. I was looking at a romantic history of my husband's last 4 months, funded entirely by my credit score, enjoyed by a woman who wasn't me. I felt bile rise in my throat. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. When I came out, wiping my mouth, Mark was sitting on the floor in the hallway, his head in his hands. "Who is she?" I asked. He looked up. His eyes were red. "It's not what you think." I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "Not what I think. You spent $60,000 of my money pretending to be a millionaire for some girl while I was working overtime to buy us a house." "I wanted to stop," he sobbed. "I got in over my head. I met her at a networking event. She thought I was a partner at the firm. I didn't correct her. Then I had to keep up the image. I used your info because my cards were maxed out from the student loans. I was going to pay it back, I swear. I was going to flip a house on the side and pay it all back before you noticed. You committed a felony, Mark. You didn't just cheat on me. You stole me. You stole my name." He stood up then, tried to regain some control. He tried to touch my arm. "Oh, look, we can fix this. We can consolidate the debt. I'll get a second job. Please don't throw away 7 years over money. It's just money." It wasn't just money. It was the calculated demolition of my reality. "Get out," I said. "This is my house, too," he shot back, a flash of the real Mark, the arrogant Mark, peeking through. "Get out." I grabbed a vase from the entry table, a vase we bought together in Mexico, and hurled it at the wall next to his head. It shattered with a satisfying crash. He left. The next 3 days were a blur of misery. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just stared at the walls. But Mark wasn't done with me. He started texting. At first, they were apologies. Then, when I didn't reply, the tone shifted. Text from Mark: "You're overreacting. People make mistakes. If you actually loved me, you'd help me through this crisis instead of acting like a victim." Text from Mark: "If you report this, you ruin my career. Is that what you want? To destroy the man you married? You'll be the bitter ex-wife who sent her husband to jail. Think about how that looks." He called my parents. He told them I was having a mental breakdown because of the stress of the house buying. He told them I was making up stories. My mother called me, worried, sick, asking if I needed to see a therapist. "Mom," I choked out on the phone. "He stole $60,000 from me. He has a girlfriend." "Oh, honey," my mom said, sounding unsure. "Mark, are you sure? He loves you so much. Maybe it's a misunderstanding." That was the moment I realized how good he was. He had charmed everyone. If I fought him, I would be fighting his reputation, his mask. I went back to the bank statements. I needed more proof. I needed to know who she was. I found a charge for a flower delivery service. I called them, pretending to be Mark's assistant. "Hi, my boss is worried he sent the arrangement to the wrong address for the order on August 5th. Can you confirm the recipient?" The clerk was helpful. "Sure, that went to a Jessica V. ad address in the Marina District." Jessica. I looked her up on Instagram. It wasn't hard. She was tagged in a photo at the Ritz-Carlton on September 2nd. And there he was, my husband, wearing the blue shirt I bought him for his birthday. He was holding a glass of champagne, looking into her eyes with a smile I thought belonged to me. The caption read, "So grateful for this man. Spoiling me rotten. Hashtag soulmate, hashtag CEO life." He was playing a character, and I was the unwilling producer paying for the show. I took screenshots of everything. I printed the statements. I printed the photos. I made a binder. I called it my book of evidence. Mark came back to the house on the 4th day. He used his key. I was in the kitchen. "I'm moving back in," he announced, throwing his bag on the counter. I spoke to a lawyer. Since we're married, the debt is marital property. You can't pin this on me as theft. It's our debt, Elena. So we might as well stay together and pay it off. I broke things off with Jessica. "It's over. I choose you." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like he was the prize. He looked at me with this smug confidence, thinking the ring on my finger was a shackle that bound me to his debts and his lies. "You think this is marital debt? I asked calmly. It is, he said, pouring himself a glass of water from my fridge. California is a community property state, babe. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. Even the bad stuff. He was banking on my fear. He was banking on my shame. He thought I would quietly pay off the $60,000 to avoid a scandal, to avoid admitting my perfect husband was a con artist. He was wrong. I didn't argue with him. I went upstairs, packed a bag, and drove to the police station. Walking into the precinct was the hardest thing I have ever done. It felt like I was betraying a family member. I sat in the cold, plastic chair in the waiting room for an hour, clutching my binder. When a detective finally called my name, Detective Miller, a stern woman with kind eyes, I almost bolted. "Mrs. Davis?" she asked. "You're here to report an identity theft?" "Yes," I whispered. "By my husband." We sat in a small interview room. I opened the binder. I laid it all out. He opened these accounts without my knowledge, I explained. He forged my signature on the applications. He set up the online access, so the emails went to a secret account he created. I never saw a bill. I never authorized a cent. Detective Miller looked through the documents. She looked at the photos of Jessica and Mark at the Ritz. "And you have proof you were not present for these charges?" "Here is my work travel schedule," I said, sliding a spreadsheet across. "Here are flight logs. When he was at the Ritz in Napa, I was at a conference in Chicago. When he bought the diamond bracelet in the city, I was in a Zoom meeting. Here is the timestamp log." She looked up at me, and for the first time in a week, I didn't feel crazy. I felt hurt. "This isn't just a marital dispute, Elena," she said. "This is felony identity theft. This is wire fraud. And because the amounts are this high, we're talking about serious prison time." "I know," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Do it." She took my statement. She gave me a case number. "I suggest you don't go back home tonight," she warned. "We're going to pick him up." I stayed at a hotel. I turned off my phone, but I couldn't turn off my mind. I kept imagining the moment they knocked on the door. They arrested Mark the next morning at his office. I heard about it from his mother. She called me screaming. "How could you?" she shrieked. "They walked him out in handcuffs in front of his entire firm. He's your husband. You ruined his life over a credit card bill." "He ruined his own life, Joyce," I said, finding a backbone I didn't know I had. "He stole my identity to fund an affair. He committed 5 felonies. I didn't ruin him. I just stopped paying for his lies." I hung up and blocked her number. The fallout was swift and brutal. Because I had filed the police report and fraud affidavits immediately, the credit card companies began the investigation. Once the police report verified the identity theft, the debt was frozen. It wasn't our debt anymore. It was evidence. Mark was released on bail 2 days later. He tried to come to the house, but I had already obtained a temporary restraining order. I watched from the window as the police escorted him away from the driveway. He looked up at the window, and his face wasn't sad. It was hateful. It was the face of a man who was furious that his victim had stopped playing the game. The divorce was messy. His lawyer tried to argue that I had implicitly authorized the spending because I let him handle the finances. It was a weak argument, dismantled by the fact that he had forged my electronic signatures and hid the mail. Then came the discovery about Jessica. It turned out I wasn't the only one he was scamming. Jessica, the other woman, reached out to me on Facebook 3 weeks after the arrest. I didn't know, her message read. He told me he was divorced. He told me he was wealthy. He borrowed $10,000 from me for an investment opportunity that never happened. I'm going to the police too. That was the nail in his coffin. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator. It has been 6 months. Mark eventually took a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of identity theft and 1 count of fraud to avoid a longer sentence. He is currently serving 3 years in state prison. He was disbarred from the architecture board. His reputation is incinerated. As for me, I didn't get the Victoria house. The credit hit from the initial inquiries and the fraud dispute process meant I couldn't get a mortgage for a while. I had to let it go. That hurt almost as much as the betrayal. That house was my dream. But I kept my own apartment. I kept my job. And slowly, painfully, I fixed my credit. The credit card companies, faced with the police report and the criminal conviction, eventually removed the charges. My score is creeping back up. It's at 720 now. Not perfect, but getting there. I wanted therapy. A lot of therapy. I had to learn how to trust my own judgment again. I had to forgive myself for not seeing the red flags. The way he was protective of the mail, the way he gaslit me about being controlling whenever I asked about money. I realized that financial abuse is just as violent as physical abuse. It doesn't leave bruises, but it breaks your bones all the same. Last week, I finally went through the last box of his stuff that I hadn't thrown out. It was his old sketchbook. I flipped through it, expecting to feel that pang of loss, that longing for the man I thought he was. But I felt nothing. I turned the page and found a sketch of a house. It was the Victorian we were supposed to buy. Underneath it, he had written, Project Phoenix. I closed the book and threw it in the trash. I am the Phoenix, not him. He burned everything down, thinking he could rise from the ashes on my dime. But he forgot one thing. You can't steal a woman's fire. You can only learn the hard way that she will use it to burn you. I checked my credit report this morning. 0 balance. 0 authorized users. I am debt-free. I am husband-free. And for the first time in a long time, I am free.